Hello everyone. No wasting time today, I'm getting right into the review. First and foremost, I give Chapter 5 a solid 10 out of 10, and I'm sure those of you who have watched the episode know exactly why. We open up right off the heels of where we left off last episode. Having left Herb's home, Ruby is running along the forest trail as the cat follows behind her. When she stops, the cat says he's glad to see that the four of them are still the four of them, which isn't always the case in the Ever After. Weiss goes off on him for leaving them in the first place, and the cat simply responds that Alex had a similar reaction the first time she saw someone return to the Ever After. But he assures them that it's not what it seems to be, but at the same time it is. But not in the way that they think, if they think like Alex does, which they seem to do. With that very clear explanation given, the cat rushes ahead and reaches the end of the path, which leads them to the actual garden. The massive lotus flower turned marketplace we saw in the trailer. Ruby hops on the lily pad and they start drifting towards the island, all the while grilling the cat on what he meant by Herb falling in a hole not being what it seemed. The cat goes on to explain that when the denizens of the Ever After wear out or break, they are called back to be remade, which is what happened to Herb. However, Herb's heart was too weak to hear the call, so the curious cat gave him a bit of a boost to help him out. Blake asks if he's dead, and the cat assures her that's not the case. Well, perhaps a bit, but not at all. As the cat explains it, now that Herb has been properly returned, he'll be fixed up nice and made into the Herb he always wanted to be. Then he'll find his purpose, which could be the same as before, or something completely different. However, when he returns, he won't remember anything from before. Effectively, the Ever After is a massive cycle of reincarnation. Its residents don't die as we understand it, they simply become something new. Though there is one creature. Though that isn't the kind of thing you talk about in polite company, which definitely isn't foreshadowing anything at all. Once they reach the garden, or the marketplace, or whatever, Blake asks if that's what happened to the Red King. The curious cat explains that he couldn't handle his loss to Alex and was recalled. When he returned, it was in the form of the Red Prince, someone whose purpose was to win at any cost, not to be nice or fair. That, however, doesn't explain why he was so mean, it kind of does, but as the cat puts it, while the prince may not have remembered, the heart rarely forgets. Which suggests that some things do stick with people even after ascending, most likely moments that had a very big impact on them, such as his loss to Alex in the Red King's case. Blake says that there was nothing about ascension in Alex's story, and the cat says that exposition is incredibly boring, and even the conversation they'd been having was, on the whole, rather tedious. Though this leaves Team RWBY wondering what else Alex may have left out of her telling of her tale. As they walk through the market, the cat, I need to come up with a better nickname for him, just the cat is getting about as tedious as exposition, says that for the Grogurt Parfait they need a bushel of grumpy ivy, one good-sized spicy potato, and the lint off of a griffin sweater, and lastly, some nose hair from a leprechaun. Pleasant. Most of those, the cat says, can be found at one stall and he can procure them, but he sends Ruby off to get the nose hairs on the third floor from the teapot lady. It's worth noting that Ruby looks uncomfortable with separating from the curious cat. Most likely she'd rather stick close to him after the close call in Herb's home. However, as the cat goes off to gather the rest of the ingredients, he gets immediately distracted. Yang volunteers to go with him to keep him focused, and Blake says she'll go too because she's going to be spending this volume glued to the hip with Yang. Weiss also chooses to go with the cat on the grounds that she'd rather stay away from any nose hairs. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this here because I'd like to do a video dedicated to this topic, but this scene highlights my main issue with Volume 9. Namely that the rest of Team RWBY, in particular Yang, seems to be more or less unaware of what Ruby's going through right now, or if they are aware, they aren't addressing it. Now in Weiss's case, this is more understandable. Her home kingdom has quite literally fallen, so she has her own issues she's working out, but Blake and Yang, particularly Yang, don't have this excuse. Sure, they could just be focused on trying to get home first and foremost, which makes sense, but RWBY is clearly struggling more and more as the volume goes on, and the three of them aren't really addressing it. Weiss tried to in episode 2, but RWBY rebuffed her, clearly not ready to talk about it yet. Hell, RWBY has literally been carrying her teammates for the past 2 episodes because they're tiny. Not like there's much they can do about it, but it'd be nice for them to have a moment to sit down and at least have the three of them acknowledge that RWBY is really struggling at the moment. Though, as we'll see in a bit, This emotional isolation from her team seems to be intentional on the part of the writers. As Ruby and Little set off to look for the teapot lady, Little hops up on her head and points off into the distance, calling out onward, before they yawn sleepily, earning a smile from Ruby. And take a good long look at this smile, because it's going to be the last one you see on Ruby's face for a while. Ooh, that rhymed. As Little snoozes in her hood, Ruby walks through the marketplace looking for the teapot lady. Slowly, the lights hanging overhead begin to go out, one by one, and pitch black darkness surrounds her on all sides until a roaring fire comes to life behind her, drawing her attention. And the first thing she sees when she turns is Penny's sword, hanging from a hook alongside several other weapons. As Ruby takes it down, a woman asks her if that one interests her. This is the blacksmith, and as we'll see, her role in the Ever After seems to be forging more than just weapons. Ruby says that she thought the sword had been lost forever, and the blacksmith responds that nothing, no one, is ever truly lost. And as Ruby tilts the sword, she sees Penny's face in it. The blacksmith asks if Ruby is lost, to which she says that her friends are just somewhere else. The blacksmith's response is to ask if she's doing this all alone. Now, that is a very interesting set of lines because of what they imply. When the blacksmith asks if Ruby is lost, she doesn't say no or ask where she can find the teapot lady. She says that her friends are somewhere else. Ruby is without her friends, without her teammates. And without them there with her, she does feel lost. But more than just lost, as the blacksmith's follow-up question shows. When she asks Ruby if she's doing this all alone, she doesn't just mean looking for the teapot lady. She means this, the entire journey through the Ever After. And Ruby's response to the initial question tells us more than even she realizes. Her teammates aren't somewhere else just in a physical sense. They are somewhere else mentally and emotionally. As we saw in the last episode, Weiss, Blake, and Yang know who they are. They have an answer to the question of what are you? Ruby does not. She has no idea who she is anymore, and she doesn't have anyone to help her with that. Well, perhaps that isn't quite true. Little wakes up and looks around, saying that they think that the two of them shouldn't be here. And here is clearly more than just a regular smithy. If the fact that the blacksmith pulled what appears to be a butterfly's wing out of the fire, glowing red hot and ready to be forged. This smithy seems to be where the people of the Ever After are remade, where they ascend. The blacksmith's purpose seems to be remaking the people of the Ever After and giving them their new forms in their new lives. Little may not know this, but as the Curious Cat said, the heart rarely forgets. They may have some idea as to the nature of the place Ruby has been drawn into, thus their trepidation. The blacksmith asks if Little is Ruby's guide, to which they state that Ruby is their friend and they want to help her get home, even if they don't know where that is or how to get there. Which goes back to my earlier point that Ruby isn't truly alone. Little has, from the moment the two of them met, stuck by Ruby no matter what. True, they're no help in a fight, nor do they have any knowledge of the Ever After outside of their village, but they give Ruby something that no one, not even her team, is giving her right now. Support. Little is there for Ruby, and has been the main thing keeping her spirits up during this journey. Ruby may not have enough hope to fill a jar, but what she does have is a little friend. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, if anything happens to Little, I'm gonna go nuclear. The only reason I don't love this mouse more than I love Jaune is because I've known Jaune for 9 volumes. I adore Little. Rooster Teeth, if you're listening, don't hurt them, please. The blacksmith states that Ruby seems to be carrying a rather large burden, to which Ruby says that she's fine, she can handle it. Newsflash, she isn't and she can't. And the blacksmith says that if she changes her mind, she can use any of the weapons that she likes and set her burden down. And as Ruby looks down at the sword in her hand, she sees that it's no longer Penny's blade, but a dagger. And as she lifts the dagger up, she sees a girl glaring back out at her from within it. This, it would seem, is Alex. This is the same girl who shows up in the intro, both in a painting as Ruby falls through the world and washed up on the beach before she gets up and heads inland. And it would seem that her dagger, for that is what this weapon appears to be, somehow took the form of Penny's blade to fool Ruby into picking it up. Something tells me that Alex isn't as absent from the Ever After as one might think. As Ruby tilts her head and examines the blade, she says that she already has a weapon, or at least she did. And yet, the blacksmith says, here she is, looking for something she does not even know. As Ruby sets the dagger down on the table, another weapon catches her eye. An axe, but not just any axe. An axe that seems to also be a gun that can change shape from one form to another. And as she looks closer at it and the hammering of the blacksmith grows louder and more frequent, the blade flashes, and we see a face almost identical to Ruby staring back at her, before the reflection's eyes flare and silver light pours out of them. There are two likely answers to who this is. First, that was Summer Rose, and the axe was or is her weapon. If this is the case, then that has some huge implications for the story. Is Summer Rose in the Ever After? If so, where is she? And what happened between her and Salem? Until now, it's been heavily implied that Summer met her end at Salem's hands, and may have been turned into a hound. But if her axe is in the Ever After, then that would imply that's not the case. But at the same time, that her axe is in the blacksmith's shop tells us clearly that she doesn't have it anymore. More than that, it may indicate that she is in fact dead since her axe was in the forge and not on her person. Or it could mean that Summer Rose chose to hang up her burden and leave her old life behind, including her family. Second, it's a reflection of who Ruby could be. Ruby has always wanted to be a huntress, just like her mother. She wanted to save the day and protect people, to be like the heroes in her fairy tales. But she hasn't been that. The road has been long, the journey hard, and the task unforgiving. While Ruby and her friends have had victories, they've had losses too, and while their victories have saved lives and stopped tragedies, all they've really managed to do is hold the line. Meanwhile, every victory of their enemies changes the face of Remnant. Beacon is gone, the city of Vale has been evacuated, Atlas has fallen, and its people are displaced too. But before any kind of choice can be made, Ruby is dragged back to reality by the curious cat calling her name. It would seem that the blacksmith and her forge were just an illusion. Or was it? We've seen that the Ever After cares little for the laws of physics. If it decided that it wanted Ruby to meet the blacksmith, then she'd meet them. Whatever the case, I'm eager to see what comes out of all of that in the future. The others have already gathered their ingredients. Weiss gets upset with Ruby for not having gathered hers yet, which goes back to my earlier issue about the others seeming to be more or less unaware of Ruby's struggles, though I suppose I can't blame them for wanting to be back at their normal height again. Blake points out the teapot lady and they approach her. The cat floats onto the table and tells her that they're looking for nose hairs, all while being a cat and knocking things over and off the table. The teapot lady takes clear umbrage to this, but before she can say anything, fireworks start going off. Yang thinks that there must be a festival going on, but as people start screaming and running and the fireworks spell out danger, it becomes clear that this is no celebration. A Jabberwalker is attacking the marketplace. As the teapot lady gives her stall that good suck and the cat fights to hold on to the jar of the leprechaun nose hairs, Ruby offers her rose pendant as a trade for the jar, saying that it contains a mother's promise, which tells us that Ruby's pendant was given to her by Summer, likely just before Summer left and never returned. The teapot lady accepts the trade and flees as the cat instructs Ruby to throw everything into the jar, but warns them that they shouldn't eat too much as they'll grow too large and have to shrink them back down, which is a completely different potion. When the ingredients combine, the Parfait appears in a puff of smoke, looking surprisingly tasty for something with nose hairs in it. Weiss, Blake, and Yang each take and eat a handful, which makes them grow some, but not nearly enough. Before they can eat more, the Jabberwalker arrives and rushes at them, forcing Ruby to scoop her friends and the Parfait up to try and flee, but the Jabberwalker hits her with his tail and knocks her down, sending the Parfait out of her arms. Only to hit the Jabberwalker, splash a lot of it on the creature, and tumble to the ground behind it. And then the Jabberwalker grows to double its size thanks to the Parfait, because when it rains, it fucking pours. Ruby scoops up the others and makes to run with the Jabberwalker on her heels, but before it can get to her, a hawk who was hawking mud cookies earlier, get it? Because he's a hawk and selling things, which is also known as hawking. Look, it was Archie's joke, not mine. Also, I hate their new logo. Thank you, Warner Bros. Very lame. Anyway, the Hawkman flies to the Jabberwalker and starts attacking it. Ruby asks the cat what he's doing here, to which the cat says that he gave the hawk something new to do. As in, he changed his purpose. So the cat can do more than just give pieces of his heart to others. He can completely change their purpose, their reason for being, as well. which has some disturbing implications, but the cat, at least as so far, has refrained from using his powers outside of a genuine emergency. He tells Ruby to get her friends to the Parfait and get them big again, or they're all Jabberwalker food. By the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but the reason the Jabberwalker is such a big threat is because when the Jabberwalker eats someone, they don't come back. The Jabberwalker is the only thing in the Ever After that can permanently kill someone, so it is a bit of an issue. And as Ruby rushes to the Parfait, it becomes pretty clear that just because the Hawker's purpose was changed, that doesn't mean he can take on and defeat the Jabberwalker. At the end of the day, until about a minute ago, his whole purpose in life was selling mud cookies, not battling soul-devouring monsters. That role goes to someone else. The Jabberwalker flings the Hawker past Ruby, smashing him into a stall and knocking him out and bringing Ruby to a halt. The Jabberwalker backs her into a corner, slowly stalking towards her. And then help arrives. Riding in on the back of a jackalope, a figure in rusted armor slams to the Jabberwalker and sends it to the ground. I'm not going to beat around the bush. We all know who it is. It's Jaune. He's back and he is throwing hands with the Jabberwalker. Blake looks ecstatic, recognizing the Rusted Knight and calling out his name, clearly fangirling over who would appear to be her favorite character in the story of the Ever After. As the Rusted Knight and his jackalope give the Jabberwalker the business, Ruby rushes her teammates to the Parfait, which they dig into. Almost immediately, they return to their normal sizes, and they get involved with the Jabberwalker fight. The curious cat leads Ruby off to the side, since she is still without a weapon. While Jaune could have dealt with this on his own, once the others got involved, it stops even being a fight. Weiss pins it down with a glyph, Yang immobilizes its tail, and Yang leaps on top of it and proceeds to beat it in the head repeatedly, before jumping off for Weiss to launch it in the air, Blake to kick it back down, and Yang to finish it with one semblance-powered blow to the gut that causes it to disintegrate into familiar pink motes of light. It would seem Neo has made her first proper move against Team RWBY. And then even more Jabberwalkers appear, crawling up the marketplace towards them. Jaune, sounding shocked, says that there's only supposed to be one, confirming without a doubt that these are Neo's clones of the actual Jabberwalker, whose current fate is unknown, but probably unpleasant. Realizing that the situation has gone well beyond FUBAR, Jaune tells them to run and leads them up the ramp to the higher levels of the marketplace. The curious cat tells them to go, that he and the Hawker, who has since woken up, will hold them off. But as we see, only the Hawker fights the Jabberwalkers. The curious cat is nowhere to be seen, and unsurprisingly, the Hawker is quickly overwhelmed, and the last we hear of him are his screams and the sound of the Jabberwalkers tearing him apart and devouring him. The four of them follow the Rusted Knight up the structure to the Lotus Flower. Weiss comes to a halt and looks over the edge, watching people flee the marketplace in terror. She hears sobbing behind her and turns to see the teapot lady crying, a crack running up her side, likely caused in all the confusion and panic earlier. Ruby takes Weiss by the hand and leads her on, as Weiss says that she's tired of leaving places in ashes. Once inside the Lotus Flower, the Rusted Knight sheathes his weapon across his back and walks past the four girls to his jackalope, patting her and telling the jackalope named Juniper, yes I did cry a bit at that she did good. Blake is practically giddy with joy, clearly awestruck by meeting one of her childhood heroes. But that joy turns to shock as he removes his helmet and reveals his identity to them, and his age. The episode ends with Jaune saying that Team RWBY finally made it. I'm not afraid to say I was crying by the end of this episode. Finally seeing Jaune again was huge, but what was even huger was seeing how much older he was than Team RWBY. Clearly he's been in the Ever After for years, even decades. His hair is shot through with white and his armor is rusted, though he's made some new additions to it. However, one thing that hasn't changed is his weapons. Crocea Moore's, both blade and shield, are rusted but unchanged. He hasn't even gotten the sword repaired in all his years here. Just take a moment to appreciate the fact that Jaune has been fighting the Jabberwalker and protecting the Ever After for who knows how long with a broken sword. And judging by the fact that he isn't dead, he's been winning too. Now, we pretty much all knew, or at least heavily suspected, that Jaune was going to be the Rusted Knight. Even the tiny tidbits we got from the teaser, trailer, and intro made that fairly obvious. And I think a lot of us expected him to be a few years older than Team RWBY, but we weren't expecting this. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about what this means for Jaune and his story going forward. Some people think he can't or won't leave the Ever After, or that he's going to die this volume. Some wonder if he's going to stay this age or somehow return to the age he was when he entered the Ever After. Others wonder whether or not it's still okay to ship him with who previously were in his age range. And if that last one sounds like a weird concern to you, like it or not, shipping is a big part of the RWBY community, so it is important to discuss it. And I engage in it myself, so I will discuss it. In fact, let's get that out of the way first. I've previously said that I'm a big fan of the White Knight ship, which is Jaune and Weiss for you sane and normal people who don't obsess over the romantic entanglements of fictional characters. Does Jaune's new age and the gap in years between him and Weiss change that for me now? Absolutely not, for two reasons. 1. Weiss is a grown woman with a literal license to kill. If she makes the personal choice to pursue romance with Jaune despite his older age, I don't think there's a problem with that. If she's old enough to be a licensed huntress and fight monsters that want to murder all of human and fauna's kind, then she's old enough to date Jaune, DILF status or no. The same is true for any of the other girls on Team RWBY or anyone else who was around his age when he fell into the Ever After. Now, how Jaune might feel about that in this hypothetical situation with their ages is another matter entirely. Though with everything else he's been through and had to deal with since Volume 8's finale, I imagine his current age wouldn't be his biggest hurdle to pursuing a relationship with Weiss or whoever else. The fact that his armor is heavily rusted and that he's still carrying and using a broken Crocea Moors tells us that Jaune probably hasn't been in the best place during his stay in the Ever After. 2. I seriously doubt Jaune's going to stay at this age when they leave the Ever After. The Ever After is full of all kinds of magic. If there's a way to grow and shrink people, then it's not a stretch to think that there's magic out there that can revert Jaune's physical age to what he was when he entered the Ever After. So it's not a big concern for me. And in case my bias isn't blindingly obvious, I don't want Jaune to stay his current age. I don't think there's much of a reason for him to, and frankly, he deserves to return to Remnant a young man. None of that means he has to give up his experience in the Ever After as well. If nothing else, it would solve the ever-looming issues of the skill gap between Jaune and his friends once and for all. Second topic, the possibility of Jaune dying this volume. I don't see it happening, at least not right now. I know a lot of people are worried about that, but I don't think that's going to be his fate. Jaune is, at this point, basically a main character. He has a lot more to do in the story, and they aren't going to throw him away like that. If Jaune dies, then it's more likely than not going to be at the hands of Cinder in a climactic final battle for the fate of Remnant. Third, the theory that Jaune can't or won't leave the Ever After. A lot of my thoughts on this tie into my thoughts on why Jaune is going to die this volume. Jaune's clearly been in the Ever After for a long time, but it's not because he can't leave, it's because he wasn't going to leave without Team RWBY. He stayed in the Ever After this long because he was waiting for them. Even if he didn't know for sure that they would arrive or that he would find them, he wouldn't take the risk of leaving and potentially abandoning them. And likewise, he isn't going to stay in the Ever After when he has friends and family back on Remnant, which is still currently in grave danger of being destroyed by Salem. If Remnant wasn't in peril, then yes, I could see Jaune choosing to stay in the Ever After since he's lived there for so long. But with Remnant's fate in the balance, I don't see him abandoning his loved ones back home. So as things currently stand, and with the information we currently have about him, which to be fair isn't a lot right now, I don't think this is going to be Jaune's last volume. And if it does wind up being his last volume, you'll all know because you'll hear me crying. But on a more serious topic, now that Jaune has reunited with Team RWBY, there's an elephant in the room to address. That being Penny's death and what Jaune had to do at the end of Volume 8. RWBY still has no idea of the full story of her death, and as I stated back in my review of Episode 1, I don't think Weiss knew the full story either, since Cinder knocked her out. But if she does know it, then so far she's refrained from telling it to the others. But now that Jaune is with them, the truth has to come out. I think we can all pretty safely guess that RWBY won't take the news well at all. This could be the moment that she breaks. But how Jaune will handle it is less clear. Obviously, he's had a lot more time to process what happened than RWBY, but has he actually come to terms with it? Think about it. He's clad in rusty armor and still carrying the broken remains of Crocea Moors. He should have had plenty of time to get it repaired if he wanted to, but for whatever reason, he's either chosen not to or simply can't. As we saw, the blacksmith seems to play at least a role in the reincarnation of the people of the Ever After. Perhaps Christian Moores can't be reforged without Jaune himself being remade as well, since it's so closely tied to him, and he refused to ascend, as the Curious Cat put it. Obviously, he's been waiting for Team RWBY, and if he ascended, then he would lose his memories and thus forget all about them. And I think that if they were going to do that with Jaune's character, it would have been done before he met it back up with Team RWBY. Also, I really don't want Jaune or any of Team RWBY to ascend. It would be literal character regression, and after coming so far with all of them with further still to go, just basically destroying everything they used to be would leave a very bad taste in my mouth. I think it's more likely that ascending will be dangled in front of them, in particular RWBY, as a temptation. I think more than anyone, RWBY is going to feel tempted to accept ascension and become someone new, someone unburdened, but will ultimately refuse to do so, and in that refusal, find her answer to the question of, what are you? But that is it for me today. I loved this episode and cannot wait to see what happens in episode 6. There's been a lot of teasing going on from folks at RT about the next episode, so I'm eager to see what they've been hyping up. What did you think of episode 5? What do you think is going to happen in episode 6 or even later? Leave a comment with your thoughts below and give the video a like as well as consider subscribing to my channel for more content. It helps the channel grow, and my goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and never forget to keep moving forward.